Welcome everyone to the panel discussion, Engineering Jobs at Risk and in Trend During the Next 5 Years. I'm Noor, Chair at IEEE University of Melbourne Student Branch. This event is jointly organized by IEEE Student Branch at University of Melbourne, Women in Engineering at Victoria Section, and Women in Engineering Student Branch, University of Melbourne Affinity Group. Some housekeeping stuff to know. Kindly turn your microphone and video off if you haven't yet. Please send the questions in chat during the discussion. You may ask the panelists directly in the slots dedicated to the audience questions, but please don't interrupt when they're speaking. I hope everyone is settled. Yeah, okay. So let me introduce the panel chair. Dr. Jillian Kenny is a civil engineer and a lecturer at the University of Melbourne. She's a champion for diversity and gets a kick out of challenging traditional ways of thinking. A creator at heart, Jillian founded 2 companies in mathematics and STEM education. This work led her to be named among Australia's top 100 women of influence and as a superstar of STEM by Science and Technology Australia. And as if that's not enough, she's also getting her pilot's license in her spare time. Please welcome Dr. Jillian Kenny. Over to you, Jillian.
Thank you, Noor. Good afternoon, and thank you everybody who has joined us, and thanks for choosing to attend this session today. It's wonderful to have so many people here. As Noor said, my name is Jillian Kenny and I'll be moderating today's discussion. We have an awesome panel today on the topic Engineering Jobs at Risk and in Trend during the next 5 years, where we're going to be talking about how engineering jobs are changing, both as a result of COVID-19 and more broadly. We'll also talk about how you can prepare yourself for a career in engineering, particularly in respect to these contexts. But before we do dive into the discussions, I'd love to get an idea of who we have here in the audience. So we've just set up a really quick poll, and Noor, if you can please launch that, and we'll just get everyone to select the option that best suits you. I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, just a few more seconds and then I'll end it, but okay, so it looks like we have quite a few students and a couple of some graduates and a few people who are a little bit more experienced as well. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really helpful for our panelists to have a sense of who's here so that they can best direct their responses to you as well. So our goal today is that wherever you are in your career, whether you're a student, whether you're a graduate, whether you're a little bit more experienced, that you'll come away with something of value, whether that's a new insight or a fresh idea or a tangible action that you can apply in your own career. Now, to give you an idea of what to expect, I'll quickly lay out the format for today and then we'll jump into it. So first, we're going to take a few moments for each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and to tell you a little bit about their background in the industry. And then we'll kick off the conversation asking some questions that start to draw out some of the high-level themes and trends that we should be thinking about. And for the second half of the time today, we'll open up the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you might have been thinking about to help you navigate the upcoming challenges and opportunities that relate to engineering careers. I also do want to thank everybody who has submitted questions so far. We've received a lot of questions, which is absolutely wonderful. And, there were some quite consistent themes that came through. So we're going to try to touch on as many of these as we can through our discussion. As Noor said, please add to the questions through the chat box, pop them in as we go. And where possible, we'll try to weave these into the discussion as well. Sound good? All right, so let's get started with the panel introductions. But just before we do, I will just pass on some apologies from one of our panelists, Kelly Partow. So Kelly's become ill today, so she won't be able to join us. She said that she was really looking forward to the event, and she's very disappointed that she can't take part. So it's a shame that she can't be here, but we do have 3 other amazing panelists, so not a thing to worry about. All right, so I am going to stop talking now. I'm going to hand over to our first panelist to introduce herself. Julie, would you like to kick off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Julie. I am currently the operations lead in the Intelligent Automation Department at Origin Energy as part of the enterprise level strategy for automation throughout the Origin Energy company. So I guess a lot of my day-to-day is spent managing automations, up to 100 robots that we currently have in our fleet, working on some of maybe your guys' energy accounts, and moving through to other forms of more intelligent automation, so artificial intelligence, and using some mid-range OCR, NLP, a lot of different automation technologies. I think now is really important time that these things are starting to talk to each other, but you know, we might get into that a little bit later. So I came to Origin by way of a little bit of a history, but I did study a degree in computer systems engineering, and funnily enough have never had a career title that has held the word engineer. Never needed one, funnily enough. Coming into automation and IT has really sat well with me. So before this, I worked for IEEE, which was formerly Dun & Bradstreet, a data and analytics company that does some debt collection and stuff as well. And then before that, I stood up the RPA capacity, or RPA stands for robotic process automation. Sorry, I should be a little bit more clear. Set up the robotic process automation capability at Australia's largest mutual bank, Heritage Bank. And that was really my first foray into automation. Before that, I had my own company, but due to family commitments, needed to sort of settle into corporate life. So I did. That's a little bit of professional background on me.
Thanks, Julie. Sounds like there's a lot that we can dig into from your experience. Dakshinee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jillian. So hi, everyone. I'm Dakshinee. I started in March this year as a graduate structural engineer at Boeing Aerostructures Australia. And that was after graduating from my Master of Mechanical Engineering from Melbourne Uni. So that was 4 years, but before all of that, I was working as a corporate lawyer for about 6 years. So a few years in Melbourne and then a couple of years in London. But I did graduate from law school way back in 2009 in the middle of the global financial crisis. So I can definitely empathise with anyone out there who's just graduated or about to graduate into current economic climate.
Great, thank you. We will definitely talk about that in a moment. I'm sure that'll be really helpful to hear a bit more about. And Roxanna.
Hi everyone, my name is Roxanna. I've been working in the industry for about 10 years or so. I also graduated from a double degree in science and engineering back in 2009 as well. So officially commenced my career in engineering in 2011 once the job market picked up from the recession. In 2010, the job market was very quiet, so I thought I would get a sort of like a filling role. It was a telco sales role to pick up some other skills along the way. But then from 2011, I worked for a number of years at Worley, or Worley Parsons as it was then known, as a technical consultant within the power systems analysis team. Later, I moved across to Worley's advisory arm at Vizian, where I had the opportunity to work as a management consultant within the infrastructure and transport space. Along the way, innovation also piqued my interest and I got involved in the innovation side of the business. And this gave me a valuable opportunity to learn about things like design thinking and exploring the shifts within the energy landscape, particularly as the industry was being disrupted. And then more recently, I had an itch to get back into the power sector in a bit more of a technical role. And so the opportunity came for me to work at S&C Electric Company, which is where I am currently. And I now get to work on microgrid projects, work with renewables and grid automation as well. So that's a little bit about me. Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you. So we might actually start with you. So you've obviously had a very diverse career. Just, you know, hearing you share that now. So I am curious, over that time, what kind of broad trends have you noticed in terms of how engineering careers might have changed in the time that you've been in the industry?
Yeah, really good question, actually, Jillian. When I finished my university degree, I never imagined that I would take the career journey that I have. I always thought that I would commence my career and take a traditional linear pathway. However, after I worked in Worley a couple of years, and I found that industry disruption came about, particularly from what I observed in my area being the power sector, where traditional coal-fired power stations were being replaced by renewables and consumers being at the heart of it all. And as well as jumping into other industries and sectors, I realised that career pathways are not necessarily linear as what I initially thought. It's okay to sort of, you know, go with your interests and be curious about other areas and try something and learn a few skills and then shift somewhere else if you like. But in terms of broad trends, some of the things that I've observed include a greater focus on environmental and climate related impacts of projects and industries as a whole. I believe that largely to be driven by the consumer, as well as being more socially conscious. So just understanding like how your actions fit in with you know, the community, the society and that sort of thing, as well as a broad shift towards embedding greater innovation and design thinking and automation across the various industries to create more customer-centric solutions. Yeah.
Great. Dakshinee and Julie, I noticed some nodding. Is there anything that you would add to Roxanna's observations?
I would definitely agree with the automation aspect. I know certainly my workplace, the mechatronics and the electrical engineers in particular are constantly finding ways to incorporate automation into the manufacturing side of things. And that's not necessarily to get rid of operators. It is largely focused on safety and improving safety as well. We're trying to get rid of you know, repetitive tasks that don't need to be done by a person and cause injury and things like that. So yeah, I would definitely agree on that aspect.
Yeah, I guess there is a massive drive coming from the customer segment with Origin committing in the next 10 years to getting out of coal-fired power completely. And it's very much driven by that customer and possibly a term that you guys might be familiar with from your studies is that human-centered design. And it rings very true to trying to deliver something to a customer, not what you think they need, but what they actually need. And so being able to look at that perspective, if you ever get a chance to do any human-centered design work or education. I was lucky enough to go to Cambodia with Engineers Without Borders and do a humanitarian, human-centered design summit. And I learned so much that I've pulled along with me in my career, you know, looking at the customer being the focus and what they need. And sometimes it's difficult in engineering, IT, automation, as you rarely get to interact with the customer. You're generally one step removed, but it does not mean that they aren't your final outcome. So being able to put yourself in that mind space, think about what the customer wants and really needs, and being able to deliver that. And it's showing in the energy sector with renewables and the ending of coal-fired power and all those kinds of things.
So on this topic around automation, you know, there's a lot, like obviously this is a really big part of the conversation in terms of engineering careers right now. You know, some people are concerned, does it mean that, you know, robots will be taking our jobs? You know, that's the sort of line that we hear, but But does it mean that engineering careers are changing at all? And if they are, you know, how? Like, what are the impacts of technology?
I don't think robots are going to take our jobs, but I certainly think they're going to change them. A lot of automation and robotics is not about imitation, it's about augmentation.
Okay.
It's about augmenting your experience and what you can do. For me at least, with the types of automation that I implement, it's not about replacing a person, it's about freeing up their time to do higher value tasks. They shouldn't be looking at Excel spreadsheets all day. That is not a cognitive event. That is not, we don't pay people for their ability to hit the keys on a keyboard. We pay them for their creativity. We pay them for their trustworthiness, their passion, their curiosity, their ability to interact with a customer. That's what we pay a person for. So that's where they bring value not only to themselves on a day-to-day basis, but to the business that they are working for. So why should they be spending their time reading through Excel spreadsheets, constantly inputting customer data? It's boring. It doesn't bring any sense of achievement. It's mundane. So I think automation absolutely is going to change our jobs. It is going to change the skills that we require, but it's not even necessarily in a vertical way. It's not, you need to go and learn Python. You need to go and learn UiPath RPA automation. What you need to learn to do is continue to learn, to be agile, to invest in yourself, and more now than ever, a lot of companies and career paths are moving through that more vertical path. Know a little bit about a lot, and be able to move with that. And everything's on the internet. Find a credible source, go have a look. So for me, it's not about replacing jobs, but it's definitely going to change them. And from an engineering perspective, a lot of the skills that you learn in university are absolutely going to be useful. The way that you plan, the way that you're taught to design and think and investigate, and also take different parts of a problem to deliver one solution. That's not changing anytime soon.
Roxanna, Dakshinee, anything to add around engineering skills, perhaps?
I think engineers are actually quite fortunate to be in a position where they're able to use both analytical skills as well as their creativity to come up with very clever solutions. So I think, you know, while there might be a lot of automation, I totally agree with what Julie had said, that it is about sort of like upskilling and determining, okay, so sort of projecting into the future and saying, I see an opportunity, there's going to be a bit of disruption here, but I'm going to see that as an opportunity. So I think it's very much centered around the mindset that you bring forward, or in terms of how you approach seeing the disruption. And I definitely think that some of the soft skills that a robot cannot, you know, demonstrate is what we would see be sort of like people will be able to demonstrate through that sort of thing, like empathy and like the interaction with other people and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just add on top of all of that, you know, in our industry, we talk about engineering judgment as a skill that you develop. And it's not something you can write some code for and an algorithm spits it out in the end. It really comes through experience and working through problems and solving those problems. You know, at work, very senior, very intelligent people have debates all the time about how to model a system or analyze a system, and that kind of stuff, well, at least not in the immediate future, you can't automate that process. So the more you work on your problem solving skills and your analytical skills, which hopefully you're getting some of that at uni, the better you'll be placed to not have your job automated, is what I'd say. So building that judgment, that problem solving ability. Yeah.
Great. So I'm hearing lots of things about creativity, judgment, problem solving abilities, you know, very human skills. Obviously, these aren't the sorts of skills that you can build by just, you know, reading a book and learning a formula. Do you have any advice around how one might go about building those types of skills?
I might take this one first. Just person who's graduated the most recently, but I would say that there is no shortage of opportunities at uni, for example, to get involved in some extracurricular activities. The things that immediately come to mind will be related to engineering. So, for example, Melbourne Uni has a race car team, a Formula SAE race car team, where it takes on electrical engineering students, mechanical, whole software, I think now, and you work together as a team and you build a race car. And that's exactly the kind of problem solving analytical skills that you would need in a workplace, even if you don't end up working in the racing industry. So extracurricular activities, I would say, are really important in terms of building up that confidence and those abilities.
Great.
I used to do this little activity with myself, and now it's really ingrained in me. Every day I look for something with more than 5 moving parts and something with less than 5 moving parts, and I think about how I would improve it if feasibility wasn't an option. And I started doing it like while I was at uni, and I've never stopped. It's just taught to myself now, but it just flexes your brain on something every time. And when feasibility isn't an option, the sky's the limit. So, you know, you can always have an opportunity to flex that muscle, I guess.
I also think that if you can also find good role models and people that you can sort of observe their behaviours and learn a thing or two of people that you admire and how they approach conversations and situations, and to sort of and maybe even quiz them if they're mentors, and quiz them, why did you take this approach and what outcome were you hoping for, and that sort of logic helps you think along those lines, like as you go along.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So thank you. Might just change the track of questions now, because there's another topic that I know is very prominent in a lot of people's minds from the questions that have come through. But first, let me just remind people, if you do have more questions that are coming up as people talk, don't hesitate to pop them in the chat box. Or we will have time soon to start asking questions from the audience. But something that came through in the questions that we received was about current market conditions in terms of graduates and whether companies are going to be hiring graduates in the current economy. So I'm wondering, does anybody have any kind of a view on that? I guess, be that, are there any sort of growth areas or markets that you think are ripe for graduate engineers at the moment? I might just start with that. And then
I would, I've certainly found that the defence industry is actually receiving quite a bit of funding from governments, and not just in Australia but globally, and they're actually hiring like normal, is what I hear. And certainly in our industry, commercials dropped for obvious reasons, but defence has picked up. So I think defence and major projects, infrastructure projects, especially in relation to healthcare and public infrastructure, I think those industries are still very much still hiring. And certainly we saw in the last, in the global financial crisis, a lot of money was put towards public infrastructure projects, some of which are still going. And I suspect that might be a thing this time around as well.
Yeah, right. And infrastructure doesn't just mean civil engineers, does it? Because that's what we think.
No, yeah. So many electrical engineers actually work in infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Definitely. I think if you pre-COVID, when we were able to actually venture into the Melbourne CBD, assuming everyone's from Melbourne, but if you ventured there, if you just saw all the cranes on top of the buildings, that would give you a very good sense that there's a lot of infrastructure projects going on, and rail and transport and all that was also a very, very hot area where there was a lot of potential opportunities.
You look at these companies as well when we talk about infrastructure and rail, and as you say, it's not just civil engineers. There's more to putting up a building than concrete, and someone's got to support that business as well. So, you know, you've got IT workers, you've got finance workers, you've got a whole range of people who are required to, as it trickles down, further support that infrastructure and building. And I'd be hugely surprised if post-COVID and as we're coming out of COVID, that in an effort to stimulate the economy, government didn't, as they did during the global financial crisis, attempt to stimulate the economy and the jobs market by investing heavily in these types of things. As for graduates, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Origin. I can only express my own opinion. However, our summer internship has just opened. We are still hiring graduates. The way we hire has changed slightly, and most companies are trying to protect the people that they already employ due to COVID, to make sure that people are safe, secure, and are protected by the companies that they work for. However, that does not mean that companies are not hiring. The lights still have to be kept on. Things still need to be done. You know, so for me, definitely in my experience, yeah, I'll speak to it a little bit later, but I'm hiring myself at the moment, so.
I think also, sorry, I was just going to say, I think healthcare and biotech is definitely also, it's on the upward trend. And I think a lot of those industries, or the companies in those industries, have sidestepped a little bit and gone into the COVID space for treatments and vaccines, but they still have their core business as well going. So.
Great. So, you know, and I think that's probably one of the positive things about engineering is it can't all stop ever. We do need engineers to keep our world running. Excellent. So, okay, so given that there are still opportunities out there for graduates, I might throw this to Dakshinee first. You know, how would current graduates find jobs in this economy? Like, you know, you've been through a very similar situation yourself during the global financial crisis. Do you have any thoughts or advice around how they can go about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that graduate recruitment is very competitive, even at the best of times. But what I would say is that, you know, recruitment is about trying to convince someone else to hire you. And, you know, as kind of awkward as it is, it's really important to try and foster a sense of self about you and be confident in what interests you and what you're good at. And I would go back to my point about things like extracurricular activities to help you find what you like, and give you a sense of passion or excitement when talking to someone about your achievements. Like, and try not to sort of just do things just to have things on your CV, because it'll be obvious to someone that you're not that interested in what you were doing when asked about that, you know, extracurricular activity. So try and find, it doesn't have to be related to engineering if you want an engineering job. You know, I know people who are in bands, or they volunteer for a non-engineering related organization, but like having those experiences will let you talk confidently about your achievements and how, you know, you can then transfer those skills into your full-time job. So that would be my advice. Just find something that you like, that you're good at, that you want to talk to other people about, you know, your achievements in. So that would be my advice. And that's how you really stand out, I think. Because, yeah, you're going to be applying with a whole bunch of other people. And if you can sell yourself well, you're going to be in with a much better chance.
I'll add to that. I think one of the things is nowadays has become a bit more prominent is actually having a presence online, whether that is on LinkedIn or other social platforms, but particularly on LinkedIn, having a profile and trying to, you know, ensure that it's as complete as you can possibly make it. commenting, you know, sharing other people's posts, maybe even trying to write a blog post of your own and demonstrating that, you know, you're interested in this particular subject, perhaps even like, you know, connecting with different groups and different individuals, and just like starting to build a bit of a profile, so that when, you know, a prospective employer or recruiter comes to search for you because you've submitted your resume or your CV, then they've got something to sort of, you know, reference back to and say, hey, you know, person X here, they've got a great profile on LinkedIn. I'd like to get to know them better. So it gives them something to go off and not just a CV.
Mm. Yeah. Great. So I might just touch on this question that's come into the chat box about, you know, prospects for international graduates. So does anyone have a view on whether COVID has affected international students or international graduates differently, and, you know, if there's anything that international students might be able to do to help their chances?
I actually don't know too much about this, so.
I think it's always been tougher for international students.
Yeah.
What my hope is, though, and, you know, there are still companies and engineering companies who will take on international students as interns, for example. And then if you can, you know, if you can manage to get your foot in the door that way, then there is scope for graduate employment, with the caveat that it's usually tied to having PR eventually, is my understanding. But there are definitely companies that will take you on conditional to you getting PR. So I haven't gone through that process myself, but that's my understanding at the moment. Now that we're all sort of working remotely, or most of us, I would say that you know, it sort of levels the playing field a little bit even more in a way in some roles. I'm not sure we've seen it be implemented yet, but there might be sort of scenarios in the near future, particularly at the consultancies, for example, where a lot of the work you can do virtually. There might be sort of groups of sort of roaming consultants or something, say, and you work on a project. You know, you might be in, group might be in Perth, the group might be in Melbourne, and you can work on the same project. I mean, it's been happening for years in, say, the legal industry. I've worked in transactions in London, Singapore, whatever. So I don't see why there aren't certain engineering jobs that you can work like that.
Yeah, I love that perspective. You know, it's not all bad. Like, actually, there are positives coming out of this situation as well. You know, does anyone have any other examples or ideas about, you know, any opportunities or positives that might be coming out of, you know, having to work differently as an industry?
Well, I know for me, now more than ever, location isn't important. It's not as important as it used to be, whereas I used to put out a call to a recruiter to say that I'm looking for candidates and I need them in the Melbourne area. But don't ask about the area anymore. I recently interviewed someone in New Zealand who had no intention of moving here to take up a position within my team. It's, you know, and sometimes I'll have a recruiter ring back and say, will you interview someone from Sydney? I said, well, what's wrong with them? Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
They said, oh, because they're in Sydney. I said, I don't care. Like, now more than ever, it has never been less important as to your location, honestly. If you've got a good internet connection, if you can't trust your employees to be working remotely, you shouldn't really be hiring in the first place, is my honest opinion. You know, I hire people for their ability to be a part of a team, be creative, to provide those outcomes, and that's their responsibility, and I trust them to do that. And so it doesn't matter where you are.
Excellent.
I think
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think there's also been a lot of opportunities that have risen as a result of being more sort of online focused. Opportunities for, you know, attending webinars, for attending sort of conferences that have now gone online, rather than taking up your day traveling to get to the conference venue, or to the office that you need to get to. You are just, you know, in the comfort of your own home, and you just log on and you listen to the webinar, you contribute in the same way that what we're doing today. It's just made it a lot more accessible. So I think that's definitely a win.
Such a good point.
Mm.
So true. Such a good point.
Yeah.
All right. So I might open it up to questions from the group now. So if you have a question that you'd like to pose to the panel, perhaps just raise your hand or pop it into the chat box. So I'll just give a moment for people to have a think and either raise a hand or pop a question in. And if you don't have questions, then I'll keep asking. I have lots. Okay, so I'm not seeing any raised hands yet. So here we go. All right, so a question about CVs. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask it that way. Otherwise, just pop it into the chat. But actually, maybe just following, while we're waiting for that, I have one just kind of following on from where the discussion was. So obviously, well, I can only assume that employers might be looking for certain things or certain skills when they're hiring people now. So obviously people working online, it is different to working face-to-face all the time. You know, is there anything in particular that, you know, as a candidate, you know, we might want to, or we might, you know, demonstrate that we have a particular set of skills that makes us a good applicant for this type of work?
I think one thing that working from home has really highlighted is, and you know, this has always been important, but being a good communicator becomes even more important when you can't physically be in the same room as people. And I think particularly as a junior, I think employers really need people who can not only communicate well, but can also take the initiative to internally network when you aren't necessarily surrounded by your colleagues. And internal networking with your colleagues is really important because you get to learn about the business that way. You learn who you can turn to for help and advice. And I think, so if you can demonstrate that you have good networking abilities, and again, whether that's through things at uni or outside of uni, I think that will hold you in good stead. Because I assume most people doing an engineering degree probably have quite adequate digital literacy already, you know, so you're not going to struggle working software or anything.
Yeah.
But it's those sort of soft skills, I think, in my opinion.
Soft skills are definitely what I look for. I look for someone who's curious. Curiosity to me is one of the most important indicators of the type of person that I want to hire. If you are curious, it means that you will get to the bottom of something. It means that you will investigate. It means that you generally will be quite keen and quite driven. So I often look for people who are curious and inquisitive. I think that's a really good marker.
Can I ask, like, how would you pick that up from, you know, a CV, for example?
So if it's a graduate, I will sometimes ask them about what projects they worked on and what they enjoyed the most about it. So what I'm looking for is for someone who went a little bit deeper than the requirement or the type of thing, so that they were looking at, whether it was more flat practical or more theoretical. I often, sometimes I will have informal quick discussion with people before I interview them, because I might be wanting to ask a little bit more. I will look for extracurriculars. They will often show me that that person has a drive to go and get a little bit more and find out a little bit more, and also self-education. So if you're on Kodi and you've been learning to code a little bit, I don't care if you're an expert or not. What I care is that you're engaging in some kind of higher understanding and learning. So those types of things for me are what I see as external markers to curiosity without having a good conversation with someone. I find engineers, you're often quite skilled. To me, a smart person is one who knows that what they're not so good at and invests extra time into it. So as long as you do that, we can all sort of get to the end there. But, finding those people who are keen, who are driven, who are curious, can be difficult sometimes. So anywhere a CV has those types of markers is always something that interests me.
Great, thank you for that. So we've got a lot of questions that have come through in the chat box now. Thanks everyone. I'm gonna pull one out that's caught my eye. So how much influence does your first job as a graduate have on your future career path? For example, if you start off in quite a technical role in a specific industry, is it still possible to expand or go somewhere else later on?
I'll start off the discussion on that. I think your first job it's not be it end all type thing, because as I could certainly talk to the point that I've sort of jumped around a little bit in my career and tried other things. I think your first job is a foot in the door where you're still exploring what you like, and I think it's an opportunity for you to ask those questions and lean into the aspects of that job that you like and explore that further. I think you have those opportunities to certainly expand once you get your first job, but it's not something that if you're absolutely not enjoying, that you can't sort of step sideways and try something else for a little while, subject to the opportunity presenting itself, or you creating that opportunity once you're in there. Because that's definitely something that you can do, is talk to people, find out what it is that others are doing, learn about what their role is, and then see if you can visualize yourself in that role. Find out how they got there, and one thing leads to another, and that's part of you networking as well. Part of you sort of identifying people that you can have as role models and sponsors as you go along. So your first job doesn't equal the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Dakshinee, you've gone from lawyer to engineer. You probably know a lot about this.
Yeah, as someone who changed field entirely, I would say no, it's not important. I mean, I think particularly, and I'll speak remembering back to GFC days and graduating from law school, a lot of people ended up maybe not in a job that was their ideal job. You sort of took what you got at the time because that was just the reality of it, and maybe it's like that again this time. But I mean, I know almost no one who's still in their first job. And I agree with a lot of what Roxanna said, but I also think it's important if you do find yourself in a job that is not your ideal job, if such a thing exists anyway, but it's important that you keep doors open if you think you want to move to something else, and that's where your networking skills and your ability to engage with people who might be in a field or in a job that you're interested in or might be interested in. It's just important to keep your doors open. And, I think it's really healthy to always be assessing what you're doing. Even if you really love your job, like, do you want to do something else? Could you expand your role in your current organization? It's very healthy to constantly be thinking about those things. Not to the point of distraction, of course, but yeah, I think there's always opportunity to move around if you connect with the right people and just, yeah, engage.
I think being honest is really important. I never had a graduate job. I did a lot of extracurriculars at uni, got involved with Robo Girls, did a fair bit of work with that, and then started my own business. My first major foray into the corporate world was with the bank, and I didn't know what RPA was. I Googled it the night before my interview, and I told them, this is what I know about RPA, but this is what I want to know about RPA. And if you hire me, this is what I want to deliver. And I was very honest that I was looking for a change, and these are the skills that I could bring from having my own company and what I did through my education and what I did through my extracurriculars. This is what I can bring. This is where you want to grow. This is how I think I can deliver it to you. Yeah, I'm going to have to do some learning and I'm going to need your support, but this is what you're going to get at the end of the day. So I think when I see CVs that don't have any related experience to the type of job that I'm offering, I will often look at it and say, why do they want to work here? This doesn't seem like their industry. And it's not because, you know, sometimes you might think, oh, they're just sending out heaps of resumes. They just want to get a job somewhere. But if you are looking for something else, be honest. Say it in your CV. Say it in your opener, in your cover letter. I've looked at this position. I have these markers. This is something I really want to give a try. Be honest, straight up. Then there's no muckiness.
Great. So something that I heard a little bit in some of those responses was about talking to mentors, you know, networking. How would, or what might be a good way to proactively look for and interact with mentors and network at the moment?
I would heavily encourage everyone to get involved in, for example, at Melbourne Uni, there's a STEM mentoring program. And it's really easy now because you don't even have to leave your house. You can do everything over Zoom or, you know, WhatsApp or whatever you like. And I certainly got involved as a student, and I had a great mentor who, for example, set up mock interviews for me and met like the head of HR. And I'm not saying you're necessarily going to get all of that in your mentoring relationship, but the worst that can happen is that you have a couple of awkward Zoom conversations, you know, decide that you're not really a good mentoring pair and you move on. But the best that can happen is that you get to know someone professionally, they give you opportunities you didn't even know existed. They, particularly if they're in a different field to where you are, I think it's a really valuable thing. So, you know, take those university mentoring opportunities really seriously, I would say. I think they're great opportunities.
I guess my go-to is, what are they going to do? Say no? The worst that can happen is that someone's going to say no to you. A, you should probably get used to it, so give it a bit of a try, because it does happen sometimes. But B, there's a lot worse things that can come out of it. If you're looking for a mentor relationship, I would advise you to first do your research as much as you can on the person that you're looking to connect with, and B, at least set some expectations on what you're looking for out of that relationship. What are you trying to achieve? What is it that you need? Because you might find, you know, someone might come to me as a mentor and I say, look, I'm not really in a position to give you that. It's not about my time. It's that I don't know enough about that to really help you. But hey, here's this person. I'll give you a warm introduction and you can go and speak to them because I have experience with them in the field or whatever that might be. But do your research and set some expectations, just some initial ones about what you're looking for out of a relationship like that.
Excellent.
I'd also add that there's networking opportunities which are now popping up as similar webinars, online networking sessions. I was involved in one for Clean Energy Council, which is industry specific. But that was like a nice introduction to a few people that I hadn't met previously. And if I was to be interested in getting a mentor, I would probably, you know, go forward, continue the conversation with them. And maybe it doesn't need to be such an official mentoring relationship, but if you could just sort of poke a couple of questions here and there and get some honest feedback, or, you know, just get a bit of a conversation dialogue going, that can help you with your own thinking and help you progress.
Fabulous. Very accessible. Okay, so one question that I'm going to ask, so it's popped up a couple of times or something along these lines. So I'll probably ask from your perspective as, you know, people who hire. So, but do you think having a postgrad degree, particularly a PhD or some kind of research degree, is either an advantage or a disadvantage for entry-level jobs like graduate positions? And also, so just in general, and also in the context of the current pandemic?
Depends on your expectation.
What was that, sorry?
Depends on your expectation. I guess there would be no problem for me to be looking at interviewing and hiring PhD students. Just depends on what they were expecting to get out of the role. And to me, that's not an indicator of you're overqualified or you're this or you're that. You know, we can work forever and study forever and there's still things to learn. So.
Yeah, great. Anything else that anyone would like to add on that one?
I don't have, not a hiring manager, but I've seen definitely at my workplace, there are lots of people with PhDs getting hired, anywhere from entry level to higher. We do a lot of very technical stuff at Boeing, so you know, there's a lot of need for technical expertise. I couldn't comment though on whether it gives you an advantage or not, but it's certainly not like no one would look at a CV and say you're overqualified for where I work anyway.
Yeah, great.
I'd say that with a PhD, you've demonstrated that, you know, the curious factor where you've, you know, explored and learnt and in depth. And I think you know, any employer will be lucky to have you as part of their team, subject to, I guess what Julie said, depends what your expectations are and what you want out of the role. And sometimes you got to take some and give some. And it might mean that in a time like this, you might need to, I guess, rethink some of your expectations or relax a few or just adjust them a little bit. But I think having a PhD should, you know, demonstrate that you've been very curious and wanting to explore that particular subject further. So it's a great thing.
Good. And I think that's a great point, you know, and it's not just relevant to PhDs at the moment about, you know, perhaps, you know, we need to give and we need to take, and particularly in situations like we're currently in, that applies to everyone. Now we have 5 minutes left. So before we wrap up, I do just want to throw back to you and just ask, you know, is there anything that, you know, we maybe haven't touched on that you think needs to be addressed or that you'd like to add to this conversation before we close out? Julie, I'll go to you first.
For me, I guess it's focusing on the things that don't change, the things that won't change in an online environment, being prepared for an interview, doing your research, having questions beyond when can I start and what's the next steps, doing your research on a company, being prepared for an interview from a physical perspective. I cannot tell you how many interviews I've had during COVID where people have got online wearing a hoodie for a professional interview at a professional organization. And you don't have to be putting on makeup, you do you, but out of respect for yourself and the other person, show how you've made that effort, because I certainly do. And so for me, that's just a base level of respect that you can provide. And it seems to be lost during COVID. I can still see you. I still expect you to have a camera on, and I still expect you to show the same respect that you would if we were in person. I expect you to, you know, have a little bit of an understanding about what do you want from this role? What do you want from the company? You know, there's nothing wrong with wanting something. Do you want a career in IT operations? What do you want to be? Because I want to make sure that we've got an organization here that can help grow you to where you want to be, should you be well driven. And I guess, so for me, it's not just focusing on the change, but making sure we remember the fundamentals that aren't going to change anytime soon, and it's still hugely important even though we're at home. And I guess the other thing is that I do have 2 roles coming up within my team that will very shortly be advertised for degree qualified or currently engaged in obtaining a degree in engineering, IT, or a similar related subject. So if that's something that you might be interested in, IT operations or automation, we are looking for 2 people. So you are more than welcome to message me on LinkedIn, and I can send you a link to the job posting when it's up in the next couple of days.
Excellent. So if you haven't noted it down, Julie Boulton. Thanks, Julie, and really great point. Roxanna, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Be open-minded, willing to try different things. Think of the not-for-profits as well. Sometimes they've got really great opportunities to have access to leadership of large organisations potentially that you might be able to sort of network with. Think of the soft skills that you've gained throughout some of the project work that you've done. They're often harder skills to master, but often have greater impact on work. Recruiters are placing a lot more emphasis, it seems, on soft skills. And make sure that you've got your LinkedIn profile up to scratch, and connect with people, like, comment, share some of their posts, and do some of your own, and add value to the industries that you work in or that you're interested in.
Fabulous, thank you. And Dakshinee?
I would just say, and it sounds really obvious, but having gone through the recruitment process last year, there's now multiple hoops you have to jump through for many graduate jobs. So you'll have to do your CV and cover letter, you'll have to do like some kind of gamification, then you might have to do a video interview, and then a group interview. You know, there's multiple hoops. It is very challenging. What I would say is try not to get yourself cut off at those first couple of steps by being really, having a really sloppy CV or cover letter, or, get people to proofread your cover letter at least. Make sure it doesn't matter what jobs you've had, or maybe you've worked, maybe you play the guitar or something, but just try and tie in your achievement to that job. Because I think a lot of people draft their CV and say what they've done instead of what they've achieved. So I would say that make sure you have those buzzwords in your CV, because I think a lot of that stuff is automated at the moment these days. So make sure you have all those good stuff: teamwork, communication. Not saying you'll necessarily get the job that way, but try not get cut off at that first stage. But yeah, otherwise, but it is an arduous process, but most people, even during the GFC, found jobs, right? Most graduates. So there are jobs out there, and you'll find your feet. It just might take a little bit more time, or like we said, it might not be your ideal job at first, but that's still an opportunity. So that's what I'd say.
Beautiful. A lovely message of hope to end on. So we've hit our time. It's 5:30. Thank you to Julie, Roxanna, Dakshinee, for your time and for sharing your wisdom and your insights. I think it's been a really helpful conversation, and you've done a great job at sharing some really tangible things that people can take away and actually apply. So that's been really wonderful. Thank you also to the organisers, to Noor, Priya, and IEEE for arranging this event. I hope that it's been valuable for everybody who's attended, and there are some links. There's Julie's LinkedIn. Thank you for providing that. There will be more events in the future. Make sure you follow IEEE for those. And if you would like to connect with any of our panelists, LinkedIn is the way to go. All right. Good night. Thank you.
So much, Jillian.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I'll email everyone with the LinkedIn profiles. While I'm sharing the recorded version of the talk, I'll add the LinkedIn profiles of all the panelists and the panel chair. so that you can just go and join straight away. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.